Please join me in welcoming all the panel members and the moderator, Dean Bond. Okay.
Well, is it on? Yes. It is a real delight, and I have to tell you honestly, a real privilege for me to be here to have this opportunity to moderate this session. And from having had a discussion with our esteemed panelists, I have a feeling not a great deal of moderating is going to be needed, because I know they've got both have some wonderful stories to tell, and I understand have known each other, are good friends also at NASA. So I think even though you've just heard their bios, I'd like perhaps each of them just to tell us a little bit about their journey, how they got where they are, and I think the theme amongst our panelists and the theme amongst all of you today is the passion and enthusiasm for science. So, Dr. Nguyen, would you like to start off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, so you've heard that I am an immigrant. I came to the United States when I was 8 years old, and I was a pretty driven individual. I couldn't change the way I look. I wanted to assimilate. I wanted to fit in so badly growing up in Lakewood, Ohio, and all my friends there in the upper middle class, and I was the welfare student, right? So this is one of those sad stories, right, where we couldn't afford clothes and we had to go and stand in the church lines. And growing up in Vietnam, I just knew that it was the American dream. You get everything if you worked really, really hard. And I'd like to say that I am very, very happy with the place that I've landed myself now. I am in that place, right, with hard work and dedication. So I wanted to give you guys all a round of applause for being here on a Sunday and giving up whatever it is that you may have chosen to give up to be here with us today, because it's important and hard work pays off. So give yourself a round of applause. So to make that story really short and brief, I worked really hard. I went to summer school. I was in remedial reading, math, everything. I spent hours in the library perfecting my English. I didn't want to change, well, I did want to change my name. It was supposed to be Lisa Smith as soon as I became a US citizen at age 18, right? And then get the blue contacts and perhaps dye my hair blonde. But then, when that birthday approached and the test came and I passed it, and I don't know why I did it. It was just something you needed to do. You needed to get your license at 16 and you needed to become a US citizen at 18 when you're eligible. Those were just goals. I was always very goal-oriented. And then it was, Lisa Smith, huh? Well, you know what? It's okay. It's okay to be Quinn Nugent, because people can learn how to say my name, just like I can learn how to say their name. So I kept it, and I've kept it for all these years. And then when I was 19, a year after that 18th birthday, when I became a US citizen, I was in college, and I applied for an internship at NASA, and guess what you have to be to work at NASA? A US citizen. So things happen for a reason, and I just fell in love with NASA and returned as a summer student for them, winter breaks, spring breaks for 5 years, all the way through until I got my full ride at Cleveland State in the master's and PhD program in the clinical chemistry department. And I did my rotation at the Cleveland Clinic. And when I was close to finishing my master's, NASA came and scooped me out. They offered me a full-time job, and I couldn't resist. It was tempting, right? I wasn't going to finish that PhD when I was 27 and hit my target goals, right? But it was like full salary, they're gonna help me finish my PhD. What's so bad about this? So I didn't get the PhD until I was 35. But, you know, I made it because it was passion, it was dedication, and you just keep getting back on that horse again every time you have a little bit of a fall. You just keep that goal in mind.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tolbert. Tell us a little bit about your path to NASA.
I'm Carol Tolbert, and I grew up right here in Cleveland. So I started off in Cleveland, down around Kinsman, 143rd and Kinsman. I don't know if anybody knows A.J. Rickoff, Robert Fulton, and Grace Mount. Those are the schools I started at until busing started around that time. And my parents took my brothers and I out of public school and put us in Catholic school. So we ended up in St. Cecilia's and then Erie View Catholic. And then I went to John Carroll. And my brothers went from St. Cecilia's to St. Ignatius and then on to college. Three of us, of the four of us, ended up graduating and going on to the Air Force Academy. So I went to the Air Force Academy. I was nominated by Lou Stokes, and I was in the 4th class of women at the Air Force Academy. It opened to women in 1976, and I got there in about 1979 in a preparatory school. And I was at the Air Force Academy. I left the Air Force Academy and went over to Chicago, to Illinois Institute of Technology. But before I got there, I was here at Cleveland State for about a semester. I took science classes here. I think the classes were in the tower, if I remember right, and they were on quarters. And then I went on to Chicago and finished up a theoretical physics degree and specialized in optics and lasers, and I minored in math. I graduated from there and went on to the United States Air Force. I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Air Force, and at the time I graduated, I thought I could take my physics degree and get assigned to foreign government, embassies. And the Air Force said, no, you're going to stay here in the United States and work on President Reagan's Star Wars defense program. So I worked on the big shield in space that was going to protect the United States from nuclear weapons that were going to be fired on us by the Russians. And I did that for 6 years. The shield does not exist. We worked on it for a long time. They continue to work on it. The Russians continue to hate that. But the technology does exist. It's the Scud missile system that was deployed in Israel back when first Bush was helping to defend Israel against the Middle East. So the technology is there, where you could shoot a missile and another missile hits it. It's just not deployed in space yet. So when I got done with 6 years of that, I applied to NASA. And initially, NASA turned me down. And I thought, wait a minute. I have a degree in physics, a minor in math, 6 years on active duty as a project manager and a researcher, and NASA, who do you hire then? What's going on? What happened here? So I reapplied and finally got in to NASA Glenn and came on back to Cleveland, where I grew up. And I've been at NASA Glenn since then. I did spend a year as a consultant, though, to the Navy for KMG Pete Marwick. So I was a Navy consultant on the SSN submarine for the Navy. Then to NASA, and I've been at NASA since. At NASA, I have put experiments into space. I've worked on solar technologies. I've worked on propulsion engines. I've worked on additive manufacturing, as they said when I first came in. I've worked on, right now I'm working on signs of life, looking for signs of life in deep space planets. And I think that's about as far as I'll go, because there's a lot of different things.
Well, I wish we had multiple hours here to hear both of your stories, because I think that the steps you've gone through and your success is amazing, and I think it's a great, incredible example to our students as to what persistence and what passion and enthusiasm can do. And one can also tell your continued enthusiasm, I think, for what you're doing now at NASA. So just to change the subject a little bit, you are the, we saw a clip from Hidden Figures. I think many people have probably seen the movie. You are the modern figures of NASA.
Right.
How do you feel when you look at the history that of women and African-American women in NASA, and I think the struggles as well as a sense of humor with which they succeeded? When you look at that, from your perspective, how does that sort of catch you?
Do you want me to go first? Or you?
Sure.
When I look at modern figures, I can relate to some of what they're going through. And some of it's still there and some of it's not there. But I think what I notice at NASA is that if there's a problem or there's an issue that seems to be impacting the ability to get the mission done or get something done, if you let someone know, something can be done about it. So in the movie, when I think it was Katherine Johnson kept running off every day, and Kevin Costner asked her, "Where are you going every day when I need you?" And so she finally told him, "I'm going to the bathroom because there's not one here I can use." And then they went and took care of the problem and solved it. So I think it's more like that, is sometimes there's not always an awareness that there's a roadblock or a challenge or something in the way. But when you can make someone aware, when you can say something about it, when you can take action, then I think there's more of a gravity of people who will join with you to get something done about the situation. So awareness.
So I've had many mentors in my lifetime, and one of a mentor that I really respect told me that you never go to present a problem without brainstorming some solutions first. So do some homework at home. And just as Carol said, and just as an example in the movie, right? I mean, the walls are there, right? And so you can choose to just halt and be, which is perfectly acceptable, right? Because you have to choose your battles. Or you can choose to figure out how to navigate over that hurdle, right? So you engineer a ladder, you propel yourself over, you run right through it. But you have to decide that, and you're in control of that, right? And that's the great, amazing thing about working at NASA and having the privilege to be recognized as one of their modern women, right? Was that someone had recognized us as being those trekkers, right? Because your opinion matters. You're valued. And I think that's why I fell in love with NASA. As I told you, I started there at 19, and I was pretty much hardcore pre-med, chemistry major. I was going to go to medical school until after that freshman year. And I was there for my 12 weeks at NASA, and I saw these amazing people. They're so smart, and they can choose to work anywhere in the world, but they chose to work for a government institution, making less pay than they probably would make in industry. It's not as cutthroat and nasty as in some places. Not all industry is like that, but it's just that collective, collegiate world continues, right? And it was this, I got to see what grad school was like before I was in grad school, because again, I was 19, and I got to see these people have families and lives outside of their work, but we come together collectively to get a mission in place. And that was a beautiful dream that I wanted to be a part of. And I wanted to do anything in my power to be a part of that. And that's why I switched to get the PhD instead of the MD. So but you choose your destiny, right? And it's okay, like I said, to halt, because you don't have to champion every single cause, right? But pick the ones that really matter to you and put everything that you have in it. Be passionate about that work.
Great. I think one of the wonderful examples that our two panelists offer to the students, to all of you, and is that sometimes when we start out early on and decide we've got a major in a STEM field in our freshman year, we're not really sure what sort of options there are for us. It's a little bit easier in some other areas. Engineering, for example, you can sort of get your head around what an engineer does. But sometimes when we start out as a physics or a chemistry or a math major, it's a little hard for us to anticipate where we might be able to go. And I think we've got some wonderful examples here of the type of careers where one can go with just these type of passions and interests. And maybe you could comment a little for us in terms of opportunities and the breadth of opportunities for individuals who choose, students who choose to major in these STEM fields.
I thought early on that I fit best in science because I didn't quite fit any other area very well. But when I got to college and I did that first physics exam and I thought I want to be a physics major, and I got back the test and I had like 15 out of 100, and I thought, what just happened? And
Do you remember those days?
and I thought, holy cow, I wasn't sure if I could still be a physics major, that even if I was smart enough, and I thought maybe it was the book, maybe it was something, I just wasn't sure what had happened. And so it took a lot of changing the perspective and understanding how you have to prepare for physics in college differently than you prepare for it in high school. And maybe none of you will have to ever go through that, or maybe you do. And it kind of shakes you a little bit and says, are you sure this is where you want to be? Because this isn't looking too good, so you better do something real quick. So my path has been kind of like that. And I didn't pass every single class with an A or a B. There were a couple of classes that I did like a C or a D, and I didn't feel I had learned the information, so I repeated the class until I felt like, okay, now I've got the information and I can actually move on. So for me, the process wasn't straightforward. I'm not a brilliant person. I just worked really hard and determined to get there. So,
Okay, so maybe everyone in this room can relate to this. So you know how getting your bachelor's degree is sort of like equivalent to getting a high school diploma now for employment purposes, for just learning life? Yes, I see some nods. Well, so my philosophy, I have a 12-year-old daughter. STEM background is almost as crucial and fundamental as having that high school diploma, as having that bachelor's degree. I don't care if you end up getting a career, a lifetime career in STEM, honey, but you're gonna know your STEM education. And with that, it is the fundamental building blocks of everything that you're gonna choose to do in life. I mean, I don't know if you guys all agree with that or not, but it really helps you think about problem solving. It helps you think about approaching any kind of task at hand. It really settles your mind. So I think that those are just really good tools to have in your back pocket. It's sort of like having a calculator, except you can just do it in your head, right? So that kind of background is really, really important. So, you know, people change careers nowadays, 7 times? Unlike our parents who had one career, and chances are I'm gonna have one career because I really love NASA. But people change, and we're ever evolving. That's what humans are all about, right? So you don't end up in STEM. So you finish your 4-year degrees at your 5 colleges and university, and you decide, you know, you wanna do something else. Great. But do you think that everything that you've learned up to that date is just trashed? No, it stays with you, right? It's a part of who you are, and it will shape you, just like every good and bad experience. So take it with you, take that knowledge and be proud, because not everyone can master it the first time. Like Carol, it takes me 10 times, 20 times, right? But I was persistent and I was determined. And yes, I have seen those 60%, 40% on my test. But you know what? I still have a PhD behind my name, gosh darn it. And it took a lot of sweat and tears and late nights. But we manage and we survive, right?
Well, I think we've started talking a little bit more about sort of going back to the student experience and dare I say it, the clear evidence of grit that both of our panelists have obviously demonstrated and continue to demonstrate. So this may be a good time to sort of turn it over to some of you, and please, having heard of their story and their successes, and sometimes the steps back before they could take a step forward. Would love to hear from you. I'll run around with a microphone. If people have a question, I think our panelists would be delighted to.
Thank you. Did you have any experience that was your final deciding factor between going into medicine and going into research?
No. And you know, life's not over, right? So I am eligible to retire from NASA at age 57 after putting 30 years in. So I've often thought about that, and I've often thought about, well, because there's that wall, right, and the barrier, and how do I do this? So what if I go and transfer down to NASA Johnson Space Center, where they have a lot of physicians, and perhaps they will pay for my MD. So you just keep thinking about your goals, right, and where you want to be. And I've just kind of learned to just enjoy my life and read it as a book, and it's a page turner, and it's like, what will today bring? What will tomorrow bring? What will the next 10 years bring? So it's exciting. So I can't say there was any definitive options, except for when I got that full ride from Cleveland State. How could I say no at that point in time, right? And then I was doing my rotation and clinicals at Cleveland Clinic, right? I mean, it's one of the best renowned hospitals around. So there I stumbled into that little part of my life until NASA came along and said, hey, we want you back full time. So I just kind of navigate through the waters, I guess. So very different from my type A personality, and don't think that I don't have a goal in mind. I do. It's just I try to enjoy it as well, because it gets a little bit too tough if you try to control everything, because you have to realize you can't control everything, and certainly you can't control anyone except yourself.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
We have some other questions about how, perhaps some questions related to how as you're starting out, some of you are in freshmen, and how you're starting out in a STEM major, and uncertainties, steps forward, steps back. Yes.
First, thank you so much for being here. Do you enjoy being at NASA rather than being in a university setting? Do you think it opens doors, like different doors for you to be there instead of at a university, or would you prefer to be somewhere where you could share your knowledge with young people like us more frequently?
Okay. I like being at NASA because it's cutting edge science and technology. So I get to see kind of what's coming and what the professors and the students are working on, because we work with a lot of them. So I like that part of it. But I've also been looking at, going back to school. I started law school actually here at Cleveland Marshall. After I got my master's degree, I came back, took the law school exam, and got into Cleveland Marshall. I'm interested in space law. So that's an area that I might get back into, which would take me closer back into academia. So for now, I like working with the universities, professors, and students in my NASA role. But after that, when I retire, as Kunyao was saying, I might head back into the academic side of things. Yeah. And that's a rewarding side as well. Be with students, that's where the new ideas are.
So I wanted to give a plug for educators, right? Because we all wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for some of the influence and hopefully positive influences that we've had on our teachers, right? I remember every single teacher I've had starting in kindergarten through 5th grade when I came to this country by their last name, Mrs., right? And I can rattle them off for you. So as an educator, you have so much influence, and you don't realize how impressionable you are to these young lives, right? And I was obviously very impressionable because I thought America was this great country and I wanted to be a part of it, and that dreams can happen, and I lived that passion. So for me to not be an educator is a choice, right? Because I do really love working for NASA, but I have this tremendous respect for the work that educators do to influence people like us and to get us to where we are. Because I said I've had lots of mentors, and some of them have come in the forms of advisors. And it's just been some really great experiences that have just carried me through to the next phase of my life, from undergraduate to graduate, from raising a child and finishing your PhD and working on Thanksgiving and Christmas. And, you know, to this day, I still keep in touch with my advisor here from Cleveland State, Dr. Lily Ng. She was a pea chemist, so she retired and is in Minnesota. So those lives and those experiences and those relationships that you build throughout your lifetime, cherish those moments, right? And education is really, really important. So if you have that talent to influence and to educate others, why not share that gift, right? I don't think that I could be as good at it as some of my advisors have been, and that's why I chose to follow the passion of being in the lab, because I talk to my samples. But honestly, if you do find that inkling of how you can inspire others, do it, you know?
Thank you. If anyone has, we have time for one or two other questions. If anybody has a burning question. Yes.
So I'm from Youngstown State. I'm a mechanical engineering and mathematics major. I was wondering what advice you could give me, because there's nothing more that I would love than work for NASA. So what should I do?
Okay, so I think I can say that I am a poster child for NASA, because I grew up in the program. I was through the internship program, which is publicly available on their website. If you just go to nasa.gov and then just look for their internships. Their internship starts with students starting in high school all the way through postdoctorates. Salaries differ based on your level of education. There are a variety of programs for STEM and for non-STEM as well. After spending 4 years in their internship program, I was also a contractor. That's when they scooped me out of graduate school. So I know what it's like to be a contractor for NASA as well. Those jobs are a little bit different. You'll have to do some homework to see what the supporting contracts are with NASA, and you would apply directly through them. And then I can give you my business cards, anyone that's interested in following up with their educational programs. And then their regular federal employment is through their website, and you would also apply to any federal jobs that way as well. So they're there, the internships are there, the shadowing program opportunities are there as well. So, you know, you might not get in first round for internship. Does that mean we give up? No. So you can go and shadow. You network, you find people that work there, and you come and you shadow them for a few days. You meet other opportunities, other people, and maybe you can find a position that way.
You can go to usajobs.gov, and I think that's where they list a lot of the NASA jobs. And as Quinn-Yao said, certainly internships. But let's say you apply for a NASA internship and maybe you're not picked up the first time. You might switch over to some of the other national labs that also have internships, get an experience opportunity there, and reapply to the NASA one. Okay, so a lady called me this year whose grandson had applied for an internship at NASA, and he was very good. He was actually building turbo machinery at home in his garage, and he applied for an internship at NASA. Seemed like he would fit, and it made a lot of sense. But it turns out that the person at NASA wanted someone who could do turbo machinery and additive manufacturing. So he didn't get that one, but I suggested, you know, try applying to one of the other ones, maybe one of the other national labs, and then come in that way. You can also go in through the Department of Defense, And when you apply to NASA and you've been in the Department of Defense, you get extra points on your application, and you get extra special consideration. So there are a few different paths, in addition to the one Quinn-Yao mentioned, that might lead to employment at NASA Glenn or Johnson or Kennedy or Marshall
Right.
or any of the other labs. You can move around.
So NASA has 10 centers across the United States and then satellite branches too. Like in Ohio, we have Plumbrook, which is in Sandusky. It's one of our test vacuum chambers, the largest one. What movie did they film in there? The Avengers. Avengers was there. That was when Scarlett Johansson was scaling the wall. That's out at Plumbrook. And then I believe the majority of you all qualify for our current program, which is the co-op program, which in a co-op, you are actually a federal employee, so all of those times spent will be counted towards your federal retirement. So in a co-op, I'm sure you are more familiar with it than I am. You will spend some time at NASA doing research. You go back to your university, and pending good performance and reviews, you will be offered a full-time job once you graduate.
I think the toughest part of all of it is getting through the application. It is not a simple process, and it's very dry. So just stick with it and keep following that application until you get an opportunity.
I'm just curious if any of the students in the room have either had an internship at NASA or in some of the research that you're doing at your university, whether you've developed collaborations. Show of hands? Okay. Okay, very nice.
Just two.
Just two, yes?
It's unfortunate.
Okay, we have to work on those numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Okay, well, I know our panelists are probably, I'm going to dare say that if there was a burning question that came up as you drive home today, I suspect they might be willing after the fact to exchange emails with you.
Of course.
Are there any other questions right now that anybody would like to ask? All right. Oh, here we go. I'm back here.
So, okay, I was asking if you know, in academia, we're accustomed to submitting papers, and it's part of our job. At NASA, do you have those opportunities? Do you have opportunities
To publish. So the first question is whether or not NASA researchers get to publish. And the answer is, Carol?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
And we are encouraged to do that.
Yes.
We do that,
So-
and we do that in collaboration with professors at universities and so forth.
And it counts towards our performance review as well, the number of publications you have.
Well, I wanted to give out, if our panelists would like to, any more words of wisdom or advice that you wanted to share before we finish up today, you're more than welcome.
Look for NASA open houses. We have open house. The public can come in and see kind of what we do, the kind of research we work on. Everyone in here should be applying to one of the NASA centers. I mean,
If
this
that's what you want to do.
area- Yeah, if that's what you want to do, right. But this area could and should be a feeder
It should be.
Absolutely.
for NASA.
Well, I think it's been a wonderful presentation, a very inspiring presentation by our two panelists, and please give them both a real big round of applause. Okay.